I live in a town where you can still hear church bells chime on a Sunday morning, where families gather with pride to watch their children grow like flowers in the sun. We honor the brave who sacrificed for our country and those who continue to serve and protect us. In the spirit of love, belonging, and acceptance, this program was created. I'm Marie Wyman, and welcome to Close to Home. Hi, I'm Marie Wyman, and welcome to Close to Home. I'd like to introduce you to Stephanie Page and Parlee Jones of Abby's House. Stephanie Page, Abby's House Director, has been in the field of social services for more than 25 years. With an undergraduate degree in sociology and public policy from Brown University, she achieved her master's degree in public administration at Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. She was selected by Abby's House in 2014 to lead extensive policy evaluations and operational assessments. As a result, she has been developing and implementing operational plans to realize the strategic objectives of the organization in mitigating homelessness. Parlee Jones' first experience with Abby's came upon moving back to Worcester from New York. Needing a place to stay while she got back on her feet, she moved in with her sister, who had come to live at Abby's house. Parlee then went on to serve on Abby's House Board of Directors as a resident representative and eventually became the organization's shelter advocate, a position she has held for 10 years. As a recipient of the Central Massachusetts Housing Alliance Judy Brown Cahill Award, Parlee was recognized for her work helping hundreds of women find shelter, safety, and stability. Welcome to our show, Stephanie and Parlee. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you.
I'd like to just jump right in and try to give our public an opportunity to understand how Abby's House has provided homeless women and children with a safe place to stay, regroup, and rebuild. And it also offers shelter, housing, advocacy, supportive services, and other things. So tell us all about how this got started and who really started it. I guess it was Annette Rafferty, wasn't it? Sister of St. Joseph. Do you want to start, Parlee? Or?
I'll try, because that is Annette's story, but I will. So they were asked by I don't know the particulars. So.
It was the Worcester Urban Ministry Commission.
Right.
Set up a task force.
Yes, to do research to see if there was a need for a women's shelter. Mm-hmm. And Annette did the research, and she came back with a report that yes, they do need a women's shelter. Mm-hmm. And what are they called again?
The Urban Ministry Commission.
Urban Ministries, I'm sorry.
I understand that in the beginning, we were chatting just before the show, and I understand in the beginning that she perhaps thought it wasn't going to be a long period of time that the shelter would be, in operation. But sadly, that didn't turn out to be the case, did it, Stephanie?
Yeah. At the time, there were just a few shelter beds for women. Mm-hmm. There were more shelter beds for men. It was 1973. So it was a different time than today. And I think Parlee was going to say that when Annette took the proposal to set up a shelter back to the commission, they turned it down.
Yes.
Really? Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, and that's where she decided to move forward and created Abby's House.
Well, it seems to me that there is still a need, and we just talked about that briefly. There seems to be a growing need for shelter. Tell us the difference between sheltering the males and the females according to the state's requirement, because you guys don't get any basically any support monetarily from the state. It's all private. So tell us briefly about what happens when families in need need to have shelter as opposed to a single person. Tell us about that, Parlee.
Well, families need family shelter. There's different needs that families need than individuals with the children and so on and so forth. So the largest family shelter provider is the state. 90% of the shelter beds in the state of Massachusetts are funded by the DHCD. So you have to meet the criteria, meaning a no-fault eviction, domestic violence, sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation, and natural disaster. So if you don't meet one of those criteria, you don't qualify. The other 10% of beds for families are called community beds. Abby's would be considered a community bed because the family can refer themselves or they can be referred by another agency. But needless to say, there's only 10% of the beds. The last count was 68% of the families that applied for shelter received shelter. 32% did not receive shelter.
Oh, wow.
So the 32% of the people are looking for the smaller amount of beds, and it's very frustrating because we don't just take families, we take women with or without children. The shelter system for single women in Worcester, there are 2 places where they could stay. They could stay at Abby's, and again, we have 9 beds, or it would be the Greater Worcester Housing Connection.
So we talked also before the show about the difficulty in finding adequate housing for the homeless and the process that one has to go through, and the duration of the stay, the responsibilities of the guests, things of that nature. I don't think people are really aware of what actually goes on at Abby's house. Stephanie, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, so in addition to the 9-bed shelter, which was started in 1976, so June 7th, 1976, so this is our 40th anniversary year, Abby's did develop in the 1990s housing because they felt like housing was going to help be a solution to homelessness rather than just expanding and having more shelter. So Abby's renovated a property next to the shelter. It was a dilapidated building and made it into 16 units of housing for women.
Wow.
And then next door, a couple of years later, Abby's renovated another building into family housing for women with children. There are 7 units there of 2-bedroom housing, 2-bedroom apartments. And now we own 52 High Street that we acquired in 2001 from the Sisters of Mercy, and that's 54 units of housing. So we have shelter and we have housing that's more long-term for women. And we have supportive services for women both in our shelter and in our housing so they can get help with the issues that may have led them to Abby's in the first place.
So in some respects, I think the general public really doesn't understand the difference between the private ownership of this type of social service, let's say, and the state. I think there's a little bit of a confusion there. I know I didn't know a lot of different things about what the state requires. It can be a little daunting, correct?
So we don't receive any government grants for our operations, and haven't over the 40 years, except I think with one early exception. And what that has done is it's enabled, when women come to see Parlee, it's enabled Parlee to help them in a way that's best for each woman.
Exactly.
And maybe you want to talk about that, Parlee, and what that enables you to do with women.
Well,
We're able to meet them where they're at. I mean, it can be any kind of, one thing nobody expects to be is homeless.
Exactly.
Nobody plans that. So women who have been in long-term relationships that are over with, that could be married or, just together, and that all of a sudden ends, be it through divorce or death or whatever it is, being in recovery, new immigrants to the Worcester area that had a plan and it kind of fell through. Parents that or moms, single moms that have a decent job. They're over income to get any assistance through the state. So, we're able to take, help them along their way.
And I understand that you get a minimal of referral from the state. Most of the time it's through private organizations or word of mouth, or tell us a little bit about that.
Word of
too.
mouth, other nonprofits, because homelessness is an issue all over the city, and each population has its share of homelessness. So we get referrals from a lot of different Worcester agencies, and since we've been in the community for so long, people are familiar with Abby's house.
Right.
So they'll have a friend that'll say, hey, go to Abby's house, or they've stayed at Abby's house before, or we're just known in the city as a place to.
So when someone
help.
calls you up, you do an intake on what their situation is and does an assessment for them?
Yeah, we definitely do that. Right now, it's a little overwhelming. We do have a wait list because of the amount of people that are looking for shelter is so great. So it's a little overwhelming. We're seeing about 2 to 3 intakes a day some days.
Wow.
And we only have 9 beds. We've gone from a 2-week stay when I first started a long time ago to, we say 30 days with a limit of 90 days.
Wow.
So once a bed is full, we can't help
Takes a while.
take somebody until that person is on.
Is there any plans to extend the
Shelter?
Yeah, the shelter area of it?
No, we're trying to go into housing because shelter is a difficult situation. I mean, it's there, it's helpful, but what we really need is more affordable housing.
Well, not to get into the political agenda of discussing all of that, because I'm sure we could spend quite a bit of time discussing the needs locally and nationally about this systemic problem that we're faced in this country today. But we're here to give kudos to Abby's house for being a survivor over 40 years. And my personal feeling when I first became aware of Abby's house many years ago was that it was an entirely beautiful and worthy cause that people should really take into consideration to volunteer for. So we need to talk about the volunteering too. We'll get to that in a little while. But Stephanie, I'm curious to get into some of the programs that you as a new director are looking forward to making, and some of the changes that you'd like to do, and what your vision is too, as well.
Yeah. Well, one of our biggest projects right now is renovating 52 High Street. So it was the last property that we acquired, and it needs major upgrades. So all the basic systems need to be replaced. It was built in the 1920s. It's a wonderful building. It's very historic. So we're putting our plans together to renovate it.
That sounds amazing.
So we want it to be there for another 100 years for the women that need it in Worcester and the surrounding areas.
That's really nice. That's a beautiful thought. And some of that work, I'm sure, do you vendor it out? I mean, how do you get something that vast accomplished in the amount of time that you want it to be done in? How do you do it?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't happen always in the amount of time we want it to happen in. So it does take time. And we're finishing our plans and securing our funding to do it. What is exciting is I think when we renovate the space, it's going to be able to help us best meet the needs now of women. So I think we'll have more space for programming for women who do come in, who that we may not have a bed for, but we may have more space where we can serve them. They can come in for meals or for programs or for classes, and that's an exciting part.
I know when I'm there, I see people working on the computer. And what kind of services do you provide for education, and as far as especially if they have children that are there? What kind of things are in the future too?
Well, there's kind of 2 parts. So there's our advocates, like what Parlee does, which works with each woman to put together a plan and to identify the resources she needs. Abby's does an excellent job of not duplicating services.
Right.
So if there's another agency in the community that provides a service, Parlee is going to help connect her to that to that agency.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
really,
I mean, Worcester is wealthy in services, even though unfortunately there's still not enough.
Yeah,
but they are there.
Yeah.
And
Tell us about that. Yeah.
our relationships in the community, 40 years worth of relationships, personal relationships. It helps when an agency calls for a woman and you have somebody on the other end of the phone that you have a relationship with.
Excellent.
So,
That's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity, isn't it?
It is. It helps.
To interact with people in the community that are able to help. And I did want to talk about, obviously, the thrift shop too. Tell us about. We were just talking about that before we went on air, and I was surprised to know that 10% of the total budget comes from that little thrift shop, and it's so darling down there. I've been down there a number of times, and it's just, tell us about that.
Well, it was started to provide a source of revenue for Abby's. Because we don't rely on government grants in particular, we need to be creative, and so it was started back in the 80s. Wow. It really has grown over time, but it does two things. It provides revenue to Abby's, and all the clothes are donated. So if women,
everything
it's
is
all
donated.
Women's clothes and household items.
Right.
It's all donated, and we have volunteers, up to 50 volunteers, who work in the thrift shop. They do an amazing job.
That's wonderful.
They're so committed. But not only does it generate revenue, it also helps the women that come to Abby's, so we can provide women's clothing to women who need it.
Right.
But also
For
to
job interviews and things of that nature.
Yeah.
and also to women of our partnering agencies
Yes.
who may need clothing.
Yeah, we need to talk about them too. We throw them a little something too here. Right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if even from Northbridge, if somebody is working with a family or a woman that they know that she's in need, a letter on agency letterhead would get her a voucher to shop in our thrift shop.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's a great way of doing it. And what do they do for the holidays? I know there's probably a number of things that go on, and what happens in the holidays? That's a time of year that the need seems to be almost overpowering, isn't it?
It's a hard time of year for
It
a lot of women, but we do have our holiday parties, which is a lot of fun. We must have about 100 people that come. Between 80 and 100 people that come for dinner with us, and past guests, past Women's Center members. We always say, once an Abby's girl, always an Abby's girl.
Yeah, that's true. You
So,
never
so
forget
for
Abby's
yourself
house.
also.
Yeah, you never forget Abby's house.
So we have, I mean, there's just so many supporters. So we have our holiday dinner, and then we do provide gifts for the women and women with children that are in our housing and in shelter. We do get a lot of calls from outside people looking for holiday gifts, but that's not something that we do regularly.
Do you refer them to the Refugee Apostolate in Worcester?
There and Toys for Tots and wherever else.
Right.
But
Walter and Kathy Doyle.
Yes.
Another blast from my past. The thing that I did really want to say was, I think the need is very great all during the year, but especially at the holidays. People need to know that they have a place to stay. They have people that care about them, and you just can't buy that. That's just an unbelievable feeling that comes from a place like Abby's house.
Yeah.
And I think the caring is the key word there, Marie. I mean, Abby's really embraces hospitality and compassion. So when women walk in the door, we strive for them to feel really welcome and not judged for whatever situation that they're in. So we're there to help them. And then, we have so many volunteers. You provide meals, teach classes, like do work in reception. So volunteers are there to greet and extend that same hospitality. And so, yes, the holidays, and all throughout the year, we hope it feels like home. People feel really that it is their home.
It's amazing.
And they feel comfortable, and they feel really cared for.
And that, you can't put a price tag on that because, during Christmas, the message that we're really trying to get across to our children, to people that you want to reach somehow, is that there are people out there that care. And in a world where sometimes violence and aggression take precedence over the softer and the more beautiful things in life, it's just amazing that we can find a place like Abby's house. In Worcester, we hear a lot of things about Worcester. I mean, obviously, it has its good points and it has its bad points. But truly, Abby's is an institution. I mean, it's known far and wide. And for 40 years, it's an amazing feat of ingenuity and resourcefulness. Who do you think benefits the most from the shelter end of the programs? We talk about the housing, and that is important. That's very, very important. I wanted to also add a question before we get to the sheltering. Well, how long is the stay, the average stay? We talked about the 30 days and so forth, but as far as someone that's actually in an apartment, what's the longevity there? I mean, what happens?
Yeah, so and I should clarify, for single women, there's single rooms with shared kitchens and baths, and then for we have apartments for women with children. And so in our housing, women can stay as long as they need to. So, everybody's journey is different. And people need us, some for shorter amounts of time, some for longer. But on average, it's probably a few years.
A few years.
A couple of
years.
And
they pay a slide rule, kind of. It's in effect, correct? Explain how they do that.
So we don't have subsidies for our rooms. So. They pay like a minimal rent, so you have to have some income to be able to stay with us. But what we do is we meet a need for women who can't afford market rate rent.
Right, exactly.
So many of the women staying with us may have incomes of $8,000 to $10,000 a year, and this is what they can afford.
Right.
So I think half or just over half of the women who stay in our housing are working, but then we have women also who are in SSI or SSDI who could not afford to be elsewhere either.
Right, and where do they go if they can't afford first and last rent, or if they can't get into a town that has affordable housing? I mean, where do they go? I mean,
people are. I mean, they're doubled up. They're on somebody's couch. They're paying for a room in somebody's apartment. They're living wherever they can. They're in their cars. They're in tents.
Right.
They're all over the place, unfortunately.
And I don't think people understand how vast the need is, and how Abby's house has stepped up the programs and what they're doing. That's housing a lot of people, women and children that need it. And your end of it, the sheltering end of it, is different than the semi-permanent kind of housing. But it's like they're in an emergency situation lots of times, maybe through physical abuse or something. So tell us about that. We talked about the 30 days and so forth, but tell us how that happens.
Well, again, we're able to look at each woman as an individual. So, and as long as, again, it's community living, because we have 9 beds, we have 2 rooms with 3 beds each, and then we have 3 single rooms. But it's community living, and you have to be able to live in that environment. But if you see a little light at the end of the tunnel and you've been with us for 30 days or 60 days, we can extend that.
Okay.
We're able to work with the individual. As long as you're working towards self-sufficiency, we can support you.
That's the question I had next, actually. So when you do your intake and you evaluate the individual needs of each case that you have, okay, do you plan sort of like a 766 plan, an educational plan?
Yeah, a service plan.
Yeah, so
an empowerment plan. We call it an empowerment plan.
So how does that work exactly?
Whatever they need to fix in their house. Of course, the first priority is housing. Where are you going to look for housing? Do you have income to pay for housing? If you don't have an income, we have to figure out some kind of income. Do you need to go back to school? Do you want to go back to school? Are you receiving mental health services? Do you need mental health services?
Right.
So it depends, again, on what the woman needs. A lot of it, sometimes it's easier said than done, because if you're applied for SSI, you have to wait.
Right.
Where do you wait if you don't,
Right.
you know,
You
have
to
family or
someplace. Right.
somebody?
Right.
You've applied for many jobs. You're waiting to hear back from a job. Where do you wait? A lot of people will try and stay with family, but even with that, landlords, you know, don't really want extra people. You know, you don't want to.
So you know what I'm hearing? I'm hearing it's a very complicated issue. Homelessness is not an easy fix by giving someone a domicile, someplace to stay. Homelessness, the roots can be traced very far back. I mean, you know, there's there's a myriad of reasons why someone becomes homeless. And it's a very, this is a very sophisticated approach. I mean, not many people realize what goes into helping people that are homeless. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah.
It can be very complicated, can't it?
Well, I mean, homeless, it's complicated because of the systems. I mean, it's basic. Everybody needs a roof over their head.
Right.
They need some food. They need some clothing.
They need medical attention
They need,
too.
right.
Exactly.
So, but how, you know, working within the systems and, of course, dollars and all of that, how do you
Right.
find this housing, or how do you create this housing?
And how
for
long have
people?
you been doing this?
For about, I'd say, 10 or 11 years. I don't
Right.
know. It's
That's
just
a long time. And I know, I read in the paper, you know, obviously articles that come out about Abby's house and that sort of thing. And you know, I obviously cut them out. I cut them out and I read about them. And you know, they had a success story, Daisy's success. And I thought she shared the message very nicely. You know, the reporter shared it in the paper. It was in the Telegram and Gazette. And I felt that people out there should really know individual success stories.
she's one of my favorite success stories.
Yeah, and, I mean, you know, this is highly, you know, we hear so much about the negativity involved in certain things in our lives, and you know, obviously from the state and from the international area, and you know, state-wise, how people are, you know, freezing to death in their apartments, and the horrible stuff that we don't really want to hear about, but we hear it anyway. But then we need to see that there are success stories, and we really need to pay attention to them and tout them in the right circles, and tell people, you know what, there is light at the end of the tunnel. You know, there are people that really care and are working to help others. And I also cut out the article about the 40th anniversary gala that you guys had, which sounded wonderful. And I think people should know that there are places like Abby's house, and we need to support them. So let's talk about volunteering. See if we can get some volunteers. What's the greatest need in the volunteer arena?
Oh, we have many opportunities.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Let's hear it. I know you need people. Do you need people to staff the
shelter.
The shelter? Okay. So what does that entail?
Well, that entails spending an overnight in the shelter. It is an overnight shelter. You would come about 5:30, and stay until 8 the next morning. You would be able to sleep, because the women do sleep. And that's an amazing thing. We do need some new volunteers in the shelter. That's one place where we definitely do. And we're also trying to get some volunteers to maybe do a couple hours on a Sunday morning or a Sunday afternoon to enable our women to be able to stay in the shelter on the weekends.
Okay.
Because right now they are out of the shelter from 8 in the morning till 5:30 in the evening.
Oh, okay.
So that would be a great way. We have one woman that has been volunteering in the shelter, a couple women who did it, volunteering in the shelter one night a month for 20, 30 years.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
So,
So
and-
what's their duties when you say they're sort of like
They greet the
an
women.
RA?
Yeah.
Kind of, there's somebody on the floor
Yeah.
at all times.
Yeah.
Like when you're in college, you have an RA. You know, somebody's kind of overlooking to see everything's going correctly.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's oh, actually,
I stayed in the shelter last night.
Yes.
You did?
It was my first night in the
Yes.
shelter.
Okay, tell us about it.
It was wonderful.
Good.
There was an intern who was also volunteering, so it was the two of us. And I made dinner for all the women.
And what did you make?
I made curry chicken with
Oh, that
broccoli
sounds
and
And
carrots.
she had 5 stars.
Oh, wow.
They
Good for you.
came and
You
bragged
know,
about it.
We sat down at the dining room table together, just like at home,
Right.
right?
Right.
Shared snippets about our day, talk about the weather, how cold it will be.
Right. Oh, it is going to be, and that's another issue for the homeless, the horrible conditions that we face in the Northeast with our changes in weather and how they're at the mercy of all kinds of bad things happening when they don't have the proper place to
Yeah.
sleep at night.
Yeah, and just managing the ice and the snow
Right.
and the
It's-
cold.
and slipping
It's
and
difficult.
falling and just too many other bad things to even talk about. But the one thing that do you need people to volunteer? I know our organization volunteers every month for food. We bring the food and we bring the gifts and they have a wonderful system. I have to tell everybody about it. Every month they celebrate the clients' birthdays. And it's just a wonderful thing. We've been doing it for many years, and it gives everybody a warm fuzzy. And I was telling somebody about it one day, and they said that sounds like that's a really nice place to get a warm fuzzy. I said, yeah, you're right, it is. So go volunteer. They did. They did something. I forgot what they did, but they came that month and served or whatever. But tell us about that
So
too.
in the Women's Center, what we call the Women's Center, we have meals at least twice a week. So it's a nice, typically a hot, sort of nourishing meal this time of year for everybody to come together. So our staff, our volunteers, the women who stay with us, we all sit down and eat together.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and we rely on volunteers and volunteer groups to come in and help make the meal.
So if someone wants to volunteer, they can call Abby's House. You have a website, correct?
Yeah, we have a volunteer coordinator, so they can actually go online and they can go find the section on volunteering. There's an app.
AbbysHouse.org.
Yeah, abbyshouse.org.
abbyshouse.org for our audience.
And there's a volunteer application form, and our volunteer coordinator, her name is listed on there too, so they can reach out to her.
Okay, and they do need items for the thrift shop. Am I correct on that?
Yes, so we take women's clothing and household items for the thrift shop.
Small household items.
Small.
Small
We don't
household
want
items,
refrigerators.
No
We can't get rid of
refrigerators.
those. And you do have liaisons with local businesses and so forth. Do they contribute? How do they contribute local businesses in Worcester and surrounding towns? How do they contribute to the pot, so to speak?
It can be items for the thrift shop. It can be food to be prepared or
Okay.
come in to do a project.
Okay. So if someone in the business community is looking for a team activity for their employees, this would be a great way to give back to the community.
Yeah.
So they can contact you too. Everybody out there that owns a small business or even a large business, you can help Abby's House too.
Yeah.
Do you think there's anything we haven't covered? I want to make sure that we've given the public a kind of a bird's eye view of this wonderful institution, Abby's House, with such a wonderful reputation. Is there something else you guys want to talk about? Because
Well, another quick way for people to support Abby's House is through the Buy a Bed campaign.
okay, tell
So
us about
it's
that.
it costs about $35 a night to have a woman at Abby's House. So if you want to do it, for Christmas, for the holidays,
Right, birthdays,
in somebody's
anniversaries.
name, yeah.
Right.
So it's $35, and we'd appreciate that.
So how do they do that? They go online and find
Yeah.
out a little bit more about it and contact people. There's contact information online that,
Yeah.
and it's Buy a Bed.
Buy a bed.
So people can make an online donation. There's a way to do that, or get our address and send in a
Drop a
donation,
check.
Excellent.
or come visit. Our doors are always open to people, so we invite people to come, learn about
Great
what we
idea,
do and what the
Stephanie.
impact of a gift can be. So what I want people to know is that Well, you say people, there's a lot of caring at Abby's. It's, when I think about who cares, I think it's the community.
Right.
Like, I love being at Abby's, particularly at the holidays, because I see so much generosity. But not just the holidays, throughout the year. People volunteer, people donate, people give, so we call them in-kind donations. We always keep an in-kind donation list on the website.
That's nice.
People donate their clothes. So I feel so fortunate. I think Parlee probably would say she does too, to be at Abby's. It's such an honor to be there and to be part of this community.
And you know you're doing so much good.
And we could not, Abby's could not have celebrated 40 years without the community, because as you said, we don't receive government grants. We depend on individuals. We depend on local businesses. We depend on faith-based organizations and civic organizations. So it's, I think the 40th is our shared story together of what we have all been able to do together, because every effort has made the difference.
That's a wonderful. That's a wonderful thought to hear someone talk about that, because it really makes you feel so blessed that you're part of that. It's something bigger than yourselves. The question that I had for you, and I know we're kind of running out of time, so we have to wrap it up. But the question that I have for you, Stephanie and Parlee, is. Who does the fundraising? I mean, is there someone involved with fundraising that any of the general public could go to, whether they own a business or whatever, and talk to them about a sustained gift? You know, something that wouldn't be a one-time thing, but a sustained gift. Could you tell us a little bit about that too as well?
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. So people could contact me, or we have a development director, Justina LaChapelle, and again, her contact information is on our website.
Okay. That sounds great.
Yeah, and like I said, we're open for anybody to come visit anytime.
Yeah, well, I'll be seeing you soon anyway, but thank you so much for coming. And I know Parlee and I talked about doing a program, but this year it just happened because of the 40th anniversary, and I'm so glad that we finally got to do it together, Parlee. And it's great to meet you, Stephanie, and I'm very, very thankful that we could share all this beautiful, wonderful information in this beautiful thoughts that came out of this program. And I want to say to our audience, and it's never too late to volunteer, and it's never too late to donate any articles that you may have around the house to Abby's house. And generally speaking, just do your job, do your part in supporting this wonderful organization. And thank you for watching Close to Home, and we'll see you next time.